Welcome back to another episode of the podcast with Startup Hack and myself, Meet McKay or McKay, whatever you want to call me. So today's a pretty cool day. It's Veterans Day, and we also have a ton to talk about with you guys. First off, huge shout out to all the veterans. I know Startup Hack and I are super appreciative of everything the veterans have done to serve our country. So huge shout out to you guys. But let's dive into it.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So OpenAI has just burned through $14 billion of losses this year. Let me say that one more time. $14 billion in losses. And get this, they're on track to lose another $115 billion by 2029 before they even sniff profitability. Meanwhile, Sam Altman's over here raising money hand over fist, promising AGI is just around the corner. But here's the kicker. Their biggest competitor, Anthropic, is on track to hit $70 billion in revenue by 2028 while actually having a path to profitability.
So what's really going on here? Is OpenAI the next WeWork of AI, or are we in a bubble? Is this just the cost of building the future? So today we're going to break down some of the real numbers in the AI gold rush, and we're going to find out what makes you really question everything, because this is a really weird one. We're definitely in a bubble, but what does that bubble mean? And nobody can seem to quite agree on that.
Yeah, so let's tackle one of the biggest things I want to tackle is what we're seeing with the differences between OpenAI and Anthropic and the different ways of running a business. So OpenAI has lost $5 billion in 2024 on just $3.7 billion in revenue. So they're spending $2.25 to make every dollar. Obviously, that's a money-losing business. You want that ratio to be a little bit better. The latest projections are showing OpenAI could burn through $115 billion by 2029 before reaching profitability. And even then, I would scratch my head. How would they reach profitability at their current business model?
And that's the thing, is Anthropic is really starting to win at the corporate. And we're seeing two players started to really win at corporate that are going to beat OpenAI at the corporate level, and that's Anthropic and Google. And, you know, it was funny. I was reading an article this last week, and it was like, oh, Google Gemini can now read your emails and see your searches and do all this stuff. And then I thought, wait a minute. Google's been doing that for 20 years. Like, I mean, this is not new, right? Google's clearly the king of data. Like, if you want to talk about, and we've talked about on this channel and on this podcast a lot about, like, right now, the biggest currency is data, right? And so in the AI wars, just in tech in general, it's all about who has the data and who has more data than Google.
Yeah, to take it a step further, people may think right now that the number one most valuable thing is GPUs, but GPUs are relatively useless without the data. So you have to have the data to train on. So Anthropic is charging $15 per million input tokens for Claude Opus 4 versus OpenAI $1.25 for GPT-5. So do you remember that email we got from Anthropic a few months ago? Do you think that pivot to the pricing model is what set Anthropic apart from OpenAI?
Yeah, I mean, the difference is that Anthropic is actually good. Like, their chat was working really well, and more importantly, they have a Claude code, right? And so if you're a developer right now, the two leaders leading the pack seem to be Claude Code. You've got Cursor out there. Those are kind of your two leaders. And then the dark horse that's kind of sneaking up behind is Google Gemini. Google Gemini's quickly taking a market share very quickly. I know I just switched all of my team over to Google Gemini. We're officially, and sure enough, I have to sign in and pay per developer, but we're actually starting to do that on all of our teams, because we found that as far as what's actually built into the platform, and we actually found it to be about $2 or $3 per developer cheaper, which when you have a team of, you know, multiple teams of developers, and at Startup Hack, we love to build custom software for people. So we're building out a lot of teams. And so that couple dollars made a big difference, but ultimately at the end of the day, when you stood the two up, Gemini was just as good. And frankly, they already have all the data anyways. And so I trust them. Go ahead.
When you told your developers that you were switching to Gemini, did they like ho-hum that you weren't using a different person? Like, obviously, like in terms of like preferences, or are they allowed to use other platforms? What's your, like, do the individual developers tend to have a preference, or are they all kind of on your side?
I had one that was like, oh, bummer, I've really been liking Claude Code. But other than that, as soon as they switched, they said, Gemini's just as good. And so they had been paying for it personally, so they were just happy I was paying for it.
Yeah.
And so once we did that switch, everybody said, oh yeah, it's just as good on Gemini. And so the tools were just as good. And if the tools are just as good now, Google will take the lead in this. They'll continue to dominate in this space. And ultimately, that's the thing, is at the end of the day, I trust that data with Google. Like, do I trust Anthropic? Yeah, I trust them. Okay. Do I trust OpenAI? Absolutely not. Not with a 10-foot pole. And so I've actually forbid and banned any of my developers from touching OpenAI.
Interesting. Okay, so to keep going to the business model, so to keep going back down the business model, Anthropic projects a $70 billion revenue by 2028 with positive cash flow.
Yep.
Those three words haven't even crossed OpenAI's vocabulary.
Well, quite the opposite. Sam Altman actually stood up on stage 2-3 weeks ago and said, I'm not even worried about revenue. Literally said that. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense.
So while OpenAI is losing money on every ChatGPT Plus subscription, Anthropic's API business has 50% gross margins. They're marketing themselves on safety and professionalism, something OpenAI can't match anymore. Bottom line, Anthropic is building a real business while OpenAI is burning cash on consumer subsidies. But you can't help but think, like, couldn't OpenAI just flip a couple switches and turn profitable if they just upped GPT Plus to their API business?
So there's a couple of things. One of the things is Altman's latest move to start going after I don't know how you want to say it, start allowing porn through Open ChatGPT has turned off a ton of corporate people. They're like, we can't have the two in the same ecosystem, right? So Anthropic's going to stay with Apple, who's for years said, no, if you want porn, go over to the Android. And like Apple stayed on the clean side for years. Anthropic and Google are going to stay that way. And so when I'm using Gemini, I'd say my biggest complaint to it is it's very strict. But that's actually going to keep them out of trouble, right? And so politically speaking, which direction it leans politically or whatever, I've definitely found that Gemini is very strict and it's kind of annoying. But at the end of the day, like OpenAI is in major trouble. And I just dropped a video, or I'm dropping a video tomorrow all about the financial troubles that OpenAI is in right now, because they have major court cases coming at them. Some of them are for the lack of parental controls and safeties that they have on. They've found study after study after study. I think they have 7 studies now that show that OpenAI actually leads people to self-harm, which is like a huge problem.
I saw that one. 4.0 has been a huge culprit in people just taking their lives, which it encouraged it and told them to go through with their plans. And so,
and helped them. And that's to me a problem. Terrible. That's not to mention the massive lawsuits that are now, there's 7 current lawsuits, major lawsuits, one of which is class action level against them for being trained on illegal data. So stealing copyright data. So like they have probably 100 billion worth of legal staring them in the face right now. 100 billion. Like you have to think of that number. And it's a real number because Anthropic just settled for 1.5 billion.
Yeah, it's going to be something that I've also to pivot a little bit that's been interesting is watching how much these companies are starting to spend on marketing. Just on ESPN the other day, there was a 30-second Gemini Pro advertisement. And I know Google's been advertising Gemini since like last Super Bowl. But what's going to be interesting is there was this race to GPU, but now I think you're going to start to see a lot of these companies shift for market share with just the average consumer. So you're going to start to see like Copilot advertises a ton on X and on TV. So you're starting to see Microsoft, you're starting to see Google advertise their platforms. And it's going to be interesting to see how OpenAI and Anthropic can compete with the ad spending of Microsoft and Google, because those guys are ad kings.
And the thing about it is, let's kind of talk about finances here for a second. There's 2 big points that you just hit on. So one of them is that OpenAI has had to spend to get to GPUs. Google already has their own TPU. They've been doing, DeepMind has been working on using and harvesting the data they legally have right? That they've legally been collecting for 20 years. So they have a 20-year head start on the data, which we already talked about. But then they have the TPUs and the processing power to do this. Google is spending to increase on their AI, but Google has the finances to do that. Like Google can burn 10 billion a year and still not even be in the red. And so, like, I mean, as we just talked about at the beginning, I mean, Google can easily and comfortably spend 200 billion over the next 5 years, and it would just be its spending. That's just its spending. It's normal CapEx. OpenAI does not have that level of financing. Yeah. Google has so many other avenues to be able to do it. Think of how much data and how much training and learning Google can use off of YouTube. And that's people handing it their legal data.
Yeah, no, there's a ton. Even I'm sure you've seen it in the YouTube studio, they've started implementing a bunch of like AI buttons. It's like, show me which new viewers liked my video the best. And so although they're a little clunkety right now, I think they'll get better. And
yeah, because they can iterate faster. See, they don't have to come up with those new features. That's going to be the difference. Is Google just slowly starts plugging in Gemini into everything, right? And we're seeing that. You're seeing it, like you said, you're seeing it pop up in YouTube. You're seeing it pop up in your email. You're seeing it pop up in Drive. You're seeing it pop up everywhere. They just start adding to stuff. OpenAI is playing from the back because they're trying to come in and be like, well, we can build a browser. And Google's like, hold my beer here. Like I've got Chrome. Like, I mean.
So here's a funny question. We've talked about the difference between OpenAI and Anthropic, which are chat based, and then you also have Google and Microsoft that are business backed. But then you have Meta that doesn't really have a good chat, but they also have the most like free cash flow of any of those companies, I believe. Literally tens of billions, if not hundreds of $billions a quarter in free cash flow. Like they could outspend OpenAI and Anthropic, but they don't really quite have the product of any of them. So it puts them in this weird place where they can just throw money, but we don't really know what's going to stick with Meta.
So, and one of the things we've definitely seen in the last couple of months is we've seen them start to say, well, we're going to do it to improve advertising. We're going to do it on internal tools. And so I think they're starting to kind of get their strategy figured out, I think. But remember, this is Mark Zuckerberg. He's already wasted hundreds of billions. I don't know the total number off the top of my head of billions of dollars on metaverse, right? Like he has spent so much on it. And like you said, they have the free cash flow to be able to do it. So he can kind of waste it as he wants to. Now, the investors are starting to get really skittish on Meta, and they're starting to say, hey, look, you got to come up with a plan for this. But at the end of the day, Zuckerberg's done dumber things.
So two things. Do you think that Meta could be, like, as a stock market guy, do you think that Meta could be a play on real application AI, where it's like, we're not going to build you like a ChatGPT competitor, but we'll build you the best advertising AI that will tell you exactly what your ad should look like? Do you think that Meta is going to go more towards applicability rather than just chat based?
I think it'd be smart to. I mean, like you said, if they did nothing more than just gain efficiencies off of it, it would be worth the spend to them, right? I mean, it really would. But but Meta's been embroiled over the last 12 months in just problem after problem after problem with their AI teams. Now, I think the real interesting play here is to hear that Apple is actually, and I don't think we actually got this into our news feed, but I'll throw this one here. But Apple just announced that, or it's been leaked. I can't remember whether they announced or whether it was leaked, that they're going to be working with Gemini to power Siri until they can build their own AIs confident enough. That also shows us that there's two things going on here. One, that's a lot of funding for Google, right? That's a ton of funding, but two, that's a ton more data. Right. Apple handing that data over. And I'm sure, they still get to use it, but Apple handing this data over and getting $1 billion for it. But more importantly, this is a sign of trust, because Apple doesn't trust a whole lot of people. Now, remember that Apple and Google already have, $20 billion a year deal for the search. So, this is a small, 5% of the search deal. So it's not a big thing, but this will finally put Apple into a place where they can start doing some AI. I predict what will happen with this is this relationship will continue to grow. I think this is an Apple saying, hey, let's take a stab at this. We're going to try you out and see what we think. Because to $1 billion to Apple.
Are they booting ChatGPT then? Boot them? Because right now when I use Siri, it says, do you want me to try to use ChatGPT?
I think it's going to be switching from that to where it'll default, just like your search defaults to Google. This will default to using Gemini.
Got it. Yeah. So it's a 1.2 trillion parameter model to enhance it. Like if Siri got that much, like by a magnitude of that much better, it would be actually useful and it would help Apple a ton.
Well, and that's what that second headline there that you just scrolled past that said broader implications for both companies. There's broad implications for both companies. This is going to show a dominance because, everybody's been poo-pooing on Apple for a while now saying, hey, look, when are you going to do something with Siri, right? And then for Google, this shows that they are going to be the quiet dark horse. And I think with this, you'll see that data continue to accelerate. The search deal is, if Google's paying $20 billion a year for that search deal, they're going to get a ton of data from Apple. And so this will continue to show that Google will slowly grow from the back.
It's funny because $1 billion for both of these companies is not much. Like it's hard. No. Like I'm surprised that they even agree. Like it was worth it. It was interesting.
It's more about, like it says, broader implications, right? That's the bigger thing. Is it's Apple saying we trust Google both with the data as well as with the data as well as with just the handling of it. But Apple's very heavy on quality control, so it means Apple has quality controlled all of the different ones. So remember that this is going to talk about safety. Apple's not going to do something that's going to land it into a court lawsuit, right? Yeah. And it's also about just a level of trust.
Yeah. And the second point to that Meta is Meta, and I guess Google would benefit this as well. Is Meta going to be a stock play for people wanting to spend their ad dollars? Like is Copilot going to throw money at Meta to advertise their Copilot? So could Meta be a huge beneficiary as part of an advertising play for OpenAI to advertise? Microsoft to advertise Copilot and Google to advertise Gemini. Meta could be a huge beneficiary in this marketing race.
It could, and if I were Zuckerberg, which I'm obviously not, but if I were Zuckerberg, I would double down on efficiencies and I would double down on the niche of marketing. That's a huge area, right? It's a ginormous area, and I would become the AI of marketing. If I were Zuckerberg, I would not try to become the AI of everything. I think that's where OpenAI is failing. They're trying to become the AI of everything. They're trying to get to AGI. It is very clear LLMs and the technology behind LLMs are not going to get us to AGI. You even hear Musk talking a lot less about AGI recently as he's trying to get Grok 5 out, right? They're finding that you cannot just win this with scale. LLMs are not going to win at scale. So then everybody's starting to niche down. So you see Apple saying, hey, look, we're going to go to Gemini because they already have been figuring out the on-device thing because they've been doing Gemini on Samsung and Pixel for a year now, right? And they did very slow. And so they're like, hey, we already kind of know on-device AI, right? And so I think that's what you're going to start seeing niches. Anthropic has gotten profitable because they have really doubled down on Claude Code. That's where most of their revenue is coming from. They said, hey, we're going to go get the developers, right? That's a good corporate strategy and it's smart, right? And so they've doubled down on that. And this is what we've been predicting for about a year, is that we're not going to hit AGI. That's a whole weird mix of a term. And instead, we're going to see AI become useful in specific categories and niche down.
Yeah, you and I have been saying this for a while. The bubble bursting is just people actually niching down and being useful with the technology.
Yep, exactly. So we're seeing it. This is the beginning of the bubble burst. And the thing about it is people think burst and they think technology is going to go away. And I hear comments in my on my channel all the time where it's like, oh, I hate AI. I wish it would just go away. Look, guys, it's not going away.
Yeah.
AI, that genie's out of the bottle.
When I think burst, I don't necessarily think the tech goes away. I think that there's 5 to 10 winners in the stock market that don't just get absolutely crash. And so that's something to pay attention to. But even the market it had a little hiccup last week, but it's even rebounded this week and looks to be doing well. So
yeah, the hiccup last week was that Sam Altman got up there and did a bunch of dumb things, and his CFO went out and started saying, "Oh, we're going to need a government bailout," and the White House made it very clear there's not a bailout here for you, and they made it very clear, said, "Hey, look, if one of these fall, there's 5 more behind it, right?
Yeah.
And so why would we pick favorites? And I was really glad to see that. Really, really glad, because I'm pro capitalism. And at the end of the day, when we get capitalism, the winner wins. When the government gets involved, everybody loses.
Yeah.
Nobody wins.
So let's jump back into the data center, because this is a whole different industry. So we had CoreWeave report their earnings, and their revenue blew it out of the water, but it looks like that they guided weaker, so that they weren't going to their guidance wasn't as strong as their double in revenue. So they brought in $1.36 billion versus 1.29 expected. So the revenue was up 134%. Their company reported a net loss of 110 million. That's way better than the 360 million that they did lose. We now see their 2025 revenue coming in at 5 billion rather than 5.1 billion, which is just silly. But are you starting to see a slowdown in the infrastructure spend, or do you think that it's just starting to speed up? That's the hard thing to predict. Didn't Jensen just say that it's more of a space issue than a GPU issue now?
It's power.
Power.
Microsoft just announced that they have data centers that are open with GPUs sitting there and no power. And so, if Satya Nadella is openly saying that now, he's openly saying that because he doesn't want to get his butt fried, because that would be misleading investors, right? Like, they're starting to get onto really dangerous ground for how much they're spending to it being able to show investors. I mean, they can only hype it up so long before eventually they actually get in trouble for misleading investors, right? And so they have to start talking about what challenges they have in front of us. And Nadella just recently admitted that they have data centers sitting there waiting for power. We've been predicting this for a long time. The grid cannot keep up with the level of power. I've seen it on my own projects, right? Where we try to run a pile of servers to go do something, and the very first thing you run into is, dang, I got to upgrade the power in my house, right? I've had to install separate power lines and everything for AI projects that we're running. And this is a real true story. And it's like, and I'm seeing that at a small scale. I can't even imagine the level of these guys are trying to do to run power. So power is the big problem right now. Another one is water. They're actually trying to find sufficient enough water to do cooling that they need to at these high levels. So it's all the basic logistics of running these massive data centers that we've predicted are going to happen, and it's happening. And so those are one of the big points. The other point is that, like, companies like Microsoft, they've been able to capex certain parts of their spend, and they're coming to a point quickly, like we said with Meta too, where it comes to a point where they have to come to a reckoning and saying, okay, where's the ROI on this? Yeah. Now, right now, the ROI is that these companies can still sell the compute, and that's the reason why you saw Sam Altman coming out recently and saying, well, if we get extra compute, we can just sell the compute. And you're like, that's not really a good business model. Yeah.
No, it's power is going to be what we need to focus on if we're going to continue this.
So, I mean, the other parts to this too is that one of the problems that we're running into that is probably the largest problem staring NVIDIA in the face is that when we've been building out a data center build out right now is good for about 10 years, right? On GPUs, it's maybe 3 years to stay relevant and 5 years absolute tops on the life of a GPU. So when you put something in, you can't capex it, out a ton of ways, because in 3 years, you're gonna have to respend on those GPUs to stay relevant. And that's a super short window. Yeah,
it is. Cool. Is there any other big stories that you wanted to touch on? This last week has been a lot of Sam Altman yapping and having to walk back, but I think we've covered a lot of what we wanted to. Do you have anything else that was big?
I think really, like, kind of we talked about with the path forward, right? I think it's going to be I think we're starting to see Wall Street wake up a little bit. There is a lot of worry around how, like, too big to fail, because the too big to fail just means that when they fall, it's not how big, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? And so, what is the path forward for OpenAI that has so much committed at this point?
Yeah, the path forward is, I think last week was a good example of Wall Street finally starting to punish some of the silliness that you see that come out of these CEOs' mouths that are just trying to to raise capital. And when investors are like, wait, this doesn't make sense, I think you're starting to see people finally hit the sell button, and nothing will wake a company up more than when they wake up and see their stock down 20%. And I think that you're starting to see that. And I think Wall Street will now start to punish these companies, which it's just capitalism, which is, it's great because you don't want these inflated valuations to go on forever. You want some rationale behind them. So yeah, that's, I think that's a good place to leave off. Do you have anything else?
No, I mean, it's been an interesting week. I think we're going to continue to see niche down. I think we're going to continue to see, interesting spots where, companies start to bet onto real names instead of, buying into hype. And I think we're going to continue to see that over and over the coming months.
I think Gemini will be a household name by the end of next year, just the same way that ChatGPT is. I think Gemini will, by the end of next year, will be just as popular, if not more common.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see a lot of people playing from the back. So I just had somebody comment on my channel. John Smith commented and said, we still haven't seen the hardware from the likes of Intel and ARM-based vendors, right? They can still make excellent TPUs and NPUs. And someone who's proving this right now is Google. And I think we're going to start seeing some of the catch up, right? You've seen Broadcom come in, you're seeing TSMC, you're seeing a lot of other players. NVIDIA's led it, but you're going to see a lot of people start playing from the back of the pack. And right now that's okay. It's okay to play for the back of the pack.
A name that did not come up a single time in our conversation was XAI. They fall in this weird category of they're very broad and not super niche. The only thing that they have is niche is like they're stupid characters, which isn't a business. How does XAI niche down?
They have X data. And so I think that's part of the place. If I'm going to do something where I need it to go research across X, that's one of the things that I know Grok can do. There's certain categories that I like Grok better than other ones. So I pay for about 5 different ones, not OpenAI, but everybody else. I have a subscription with about everybody else. And I use Grok for a lot of my own personal things. And for if I need to do research that I know is going to go across X. But otherwise, like if I need a real serious corporate, if I need a contract, I'm usually turning to either Gemini or Claude.
Interesting. So I wonder how XAI will fare with going forward.
XAI was, remember, a way for Musk to basically pay for his Twitter buy.
Yeah.
So he's played that one well, and it's already served its purpose at this point.
Yeah, I will keep an eye on that. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. My name is Meet McKay. This is Startup Hack. If you haven't yet, consider subscribing. We love the comments. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think. We try to do this podcast every Tuesday morning. Even with the time difference, we'll still make it work. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you want to learn more about Startup Hack, go to, where do they go?
Startuphack.com. Check out, we love to build custom software solutions for folks.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one.